Had a friend post a video about how Mormons, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, are in fact Christian, and it's always interesting to see the types of replies that a video like that gets. And I just had an exchange with somebody in that friend's comment section that was so interesting to me, and to me is so illustrative of the types of conversations that we have and the types of, almost willful ignorance that people step into when they try to engage in these conversations. So in reply to my friend's video, someone came into the comments section and said, "Nope, if you were Christians, you'd go to a Christian church. You leave off LDS. J. Smith started the LDS church to completely separate themselves from Christians. Doctrinally, you're not Christian." Okay, if that's your opinion, that's great. Let's see what my friend replied. My friend replies, "Which tradition do you align with?" It's a nice question. That's a good way to have a conversation that involves listening. The person then replied, "Not the one Joseph Smith started from his secret knowledge, Islam 2.0. I love the Islam Restored Church of Christ comparisons because usually when I see them, and if I'm in a little bit of a snarky mood, I will reply with something like this, and this is where I entered the conversation. Islam 2.0 tells me that you don't know much about Islam or about the Restored Church of Christ. Come and see. When people make these comparisons between Islam and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they're usually coming from a place of extreme ignorance. About the only thing that the two faith traditions have in common is that both purport to have post-biblical prophets, and both have scriptures that are after the Bible. And other than that, the two faiths could not be more different. They could be more different, but in Islam you have Islam in some ways is actually closer to sola scriptura Christianity, because in Islam, the Prophet Muhammad is the last prophet. The Quran is the last word from God. And if you say that there are more prophets, or if there is something beyond the sola scriptura of the Quran, or in the case of sola scriptura Christians, the Bible, then you are committing a heresy. And so in that regard, Islam and traditional Christianity and the doctrine of sola scriptura, and I know Islam doesn't quite, they have the hadiths and things like that mean that they're not exactly sola scriptura, but they certainly say that there are no more prophets and that there is not ever going to be any scripture, again, that is as authoritative as the Quran. We, on the other hand, believe that not only was Joseph Smith a prophet, called to be a prophet of God, but that he actually passed his apostolic authority on to successor prophets, and that we have a living prophet today. And that the living prophet, although it has been 100 years since one of our prophets propounded scripture that has the same weight of authority as the Bible, the Book of Mormon, or the Doctrine and Covenants, we believe that the prophet today could, if he wanted to, propound scripture with every bit of authority, the weight of authority that the Bible or the Book of Mormon, or for Muslims, the Quran has. So that is one of the big differences. We are not sola scriptura. We don't believe that the heavens are closed. We do not believe that God does not actively speak to his children today. So in that regard, the Restored Church of Christ, aka Mormonism, and Islam are very different. And I will add that I'm not an expert in Islam, though I have spent some time studying it when I was in London about a year ago, and saw the Muslim population there just dominating the public spaces, Trafalgar Square and things like that, with just their presence and some of the chanting that they were doing and things like that. I was like, interesting. And I saw a guy handing out free copies of the Quran, and so I picked one up. And I read as much of the Quran as I needed to until I got to the Islamic doctrine of expiation of sins. How do we free ourselves from sin? I was curious the way that Islam approached that, and so I read, I think, until, I can't remember if it's the 13th or 14th surah, in order to see how Islam handles that. I didn't think the answer was particularly convincing, honestly, but I've studied enough of Islam and know enough about it to know that calling the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Islam 2.0 is just really a way of showing your cards and showing that you don't know what your cards mean. That's kind of what it means. But this person replied and said, 2 men go into caves and receive secret knowledge about the church being lost to paganism, and they have the one true church. Yeah, no similarities at all, except being identical. And so, I mean, there's so many things in this statement that misrepresent the restored Church of Christ. So I just went with the very most low-lying fruit possible, and here's what I replied. All right, full disclosure, the emojis were a little snarky, but I guess I'm in a snarky mood. But here's what I replied. Please send me a link to the cave that Joseph Smith went into. You guys, Joseph Smith didn't go into a cave to receive the Book of Mormon. That's not the way that it happened. And seemed like an easy thing to point out that while Prophet Muhammad spent 20 years in a cave receiving the Quran, Joseph Smith was told by an angel where to find golden plates, which he then retrieved after a 4-year probationary period to find out if he was worthy enough to do so, and then translated the Book of Mormon by the gift and power of God. Very different process than going into a cave and receiving revelation. And so that was just the first inaccuracy in that comment. Let's see what the person here replies with. Mormons demanding geographical locations is super funny when you can't prove any of the history in the Book of Mormon. And again, this comment just shows an extreme ignorance. And actually, I finally, in the making of this video, I looked at this creator's profile, and they actually do an anti-Islam channel. I don't know, maybe it's worth, but I'm going to have to go consume some of this creator's content to let you know if I recommend it or not. I don't like trading videos and calling people out by name because it just creates a lot of drama, and I'm not into that. But the reason I created this video was just to give you an idea the types of conversations that happen so often here on TikTok. It's people regurgitating bullet points against the restored Church of Christ in ways that show that the person themselves has never done any of the digging themselves. They haven't done their own research. All they did was follow bullet points. All they did was read something from one of the big content creators that fights the church. You can tell when somebody really is in good faith pointing out things that they know, and when they're just hitting the bullet points. And this was a very classic example of somebody just hitting the bullet points. I'm now curious to check out this content creator's bullet points about or content about Islam, because are they doing the same thing to Islam that they're doing here, just reductionist, copycat, unthinking things. And so often this is what the type of content that we put up with from detractors to the church, both among people who have left the church and people who have probably not spent more than 3 seconds looking into the church. So anyway, I know that Jesus has a church on earth. I know that if you read the letter by Paul to the Ephesians and you see the organization that Paul outlines in the church, that the church ought to be with prophets, apostles, evangelists, pastors, teachers, etc., that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the church that follows the structure that is laid out in the Bible, in the New Testament, for what the Church of Jesus Christ ought to look at. And so if you've made it this far into this video, I highly recommend to you and invite you to read the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ, because the Book of Mormon is the way that you can know that God really does have prophets on the earth again today. And if God were really speaking to somebody on earth and had given him all the authority to lead his Ephesians 1 church on earth, wouldn't that be worth knowing? If you think it is, come and see. Take a look. God bless.